Hi there. I'm Leolia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, today's title is What or Who Are You Trying to Avenge? Okay, avenge. Think about that. Because if you are trying to avenge somebody or something, all I can say is stop trying to do God's job. And yes, back on my Western kick again. And but this, you know what? This is really a little bit different. In fact, it's a lot different. Um, because it begins with a stranger riding into a town called Clayville. Now, all you can see is his boots. So you can't see his body, you can't see anything up, just his boots. Why? Because on his boots there is a emblem, and the emblem is of the scales of justice. Okay? And below the scales, the word justice is actually printed on his boot. So then the scene goes to a hangman. A hangman's over there walking away from the scaffold where the hanging took place. And a hangman's job was not a very good job. It was just something, a lot of guys just did it because they needed money. And they paid you to be the one to pull the lever to drop the victim. So he was walking away from the scaffold, but he was looking so stressed and so downtrodden. And he had a small bottle of whiskey in his hand, and he kept taking a drink from that. And all of a sudden, a stranger rides up to him and he says, "Judgment is mine. I am the true judge of all things." And he shot him. He shot him twice and he rode away. Now, that was in that town. But now, in the town of Norfolk, Lucas is at his ranch. And well, now he's in the town because he's collecting up his mail and getting his items and things at the store. And Mark says, "Oh, you got a letter, Pa. Can I open it?" And he's like, "Oh, sure, son." But when Mark opened it, he looked and he said, "Well, this is saying something about a hangman got shot." So Lucas, snatched the envelope, the letter from him, and he's looking in this envelope. But also with the news clipping of the hangman got shot, there is a personal note in there. And it says, "Judgment is mine, for I am the true judge of all things." Now, also at the same time, Lucas got that in his mail. Judge Harlow, now he was the judge that sentenced that man back then to hang. So he also got an article in his mail. And it said, "Hangman killed at the foot of a scaffold." And as the judge was coming out of the post office reading his mail, the shooter rides up to him and he says, "This is my judgment, for I I'm the only true justice. And he shoots him twice and rides off. Now that's strange. But now let's fast forward. The next day, you see Micah, he's coming out to Lucas's ranch and he says, oh, here, I have this for you. And he hands him a letter. And he said, well, the clerk at the office, at the post office said for me to give this to you because I told him I was coming out this way. So, Lucas opens the envelope and enclosed there was a news article. And that was saying, Judge Harlow shot by unknown rider. That was the judge back then. So as Lucas is reading the article in his own envelope, Micah asked him, he said, well, is that the story about the murder of Judge Martin Harlow? So Lucas is looking at him like, well, how did he know what was in my mail? And Lucas said, oh, don't worry. I got a notice on it from the sheriff up there. He was saying, just in case this fellow happens to be heading this way, the fellow that's shooting people and riding off. So that's how Micah knew. So Lucas said, well, did he tell you what he looked like? And Micah said, well, now I figured you'd be able to tell me that. And Lucas said, I can't. And Micah said, well, meaning I guess the post office guy, he said you got the same kind of letter once before. And then Lucas said, well, yeah, you see, it was like this. And he starts to tell Micah what happened back then when he got a letter like this before. He said, yeah, the first letter went to the man who hung Ethan Burton. Then a letter went to the man who sentenced Burton. And now the letter has come to the man who caught Ethan Burton back then. And Micah said, you? And he said, yeah. He shakes his head, yeah, and he hands Micah the note, and he says, and the note says, the day of judgment approaches, and I am the judge. And Lucas said, yeah, he is a judge. He's Judge Zephaniah Burton, Ethan's father. So Micah said, well, who is Ethan? And he said, well, he was just a wild young kid, and maybe about 20 back then. And he loved to drink and holler and hoop, and nobody paid any attention to him except when he was drunk. But he was so wild, and, he was just excitable and hyped up. And that's when he would get people's attention. But one Sunday morning, he said, Mark and I were leaving the church when he came walking down the street with his horse. And of course, he was drunk and cussing like always. And the priest and the deacon went over to try to calm him down and shut him up because it was Sunday and the people were coming out of church. And then Ethan had a gun in his hand and he started shooting. And by the time he stopped shooting, the deacon was dead and two little girls were wounded. Then Ethan got on his horse and rode out of town. So, of course, the sheriff, he had to form a posse, and I was on the posse that went after him. But when we caught up with him, he was in a box canyon. But the only way we could get to him without somebody getting killed was with this. And he held up his rifle because they all had handguns and the canyon was deep, but the rifle could, shoot down that far, that distance. And the sheriff didn't want to kill him. He just wanted him wounded so that they could capture him. So he says, So I did, but I shattered his leg. But we went down, they got him, they brought him back. They did try him, and he was convicted, and he was to hang. And Michael was like, well, then he was hung legal. There was no lynching, was it? And he was like, no, that's what the people wanted. It was legal. But then I got that letter back then. He's still talking about back then. That was years ago. Um, they said that at that time, he got a letter saying that he had to wait in that town until everybody was waiting for this guy's leg to heal before they would hang him. So him and Mark left. He did not want to live there anymore. So he left, and that's when they came to North Fork. So, well, after it was all over, the hanging and everything was over, then he and Judge Harlow got these letters. And they were kind of both about the same, and they were in the same handwriting, and they were signed by Judge Zephaniah Burton. That was his father. And he, in this letter to him and the judge, he was ranting and raving about how his boy could do no wrong, and how he was hung for no reason, and I'm going to sit in judgment, how he's going to sit in judgment of all the men who judged his son. Only I'm going to sit in judgment as the judge and the executioner. And he just went on in this letter. And Micah was saying, well, wasn't anything done back then? Those were threats. And Lucas was saying, well, we did try. All we knew was that the letter came from Kentucky. And we found that it came from a circuit judge named Zephaniah Burton. And he was a very harsh, unyielding, meaning he wouldn't give nobody a break. I don't care what you did, how you presented it. He was what they called a regular hanging judge. That's all he wanted to do. He was a hanging judge, but now he had lost the election there. And even back then, when they questioned Ethan about him, well, where's your father? Who's your father? He didn't claim his father. He said he never knew who he was. He was denying his own father back then. And I assumed because he was being rebellious. His father was a judge, and you're out drinking and, acting crazy. So that's why I guess he was denying his father. So anyway, Micah asked him, well, do you know where he is? Where in Kentucky? And he said, well, yeah, why? And Micah said, well, I'd like to get a look at this man, wouldn't you? And then Lucas said, well, yeah, sure, I would. I mean, I'd be real happy to know what the man looks like who wants to kill me. So fast forward, the next day, while Lucas was taking care of one of his calves, he was carrying the calf to the barn. And all of a sudden, there was a gun at his neck, in the back of his neck. And a voice saying, don't turn around unless you want to look at the face of death. Put the calf down gently. For I have no judgment to pass on the calf, nor on a man. For it has been revealed to me that you too have a son. And Lucas was putting the calf down, and he looked up, and he looked right in the man's face. And the man said, that's right, for I am the judge, and this is my judgment. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a son for a son. This is simple, poetic justice. And Lucas was like, yeah, poetic justice. But he was looking over here past the man because his rifle was over there, but it was still out of his reach. It was a few feet away. So they're walking toward the gate, and the judge, he's going on and on. He's like, all my life I raised my son in a stern and righteous mood, and my son is guilty of no evil. And he's like really religious and going on. And so you will suffer as I have suffered, waiting hour upon hour, waiting for my son to hang. Well, this is the judgment I put upon you. And he pushes Lucas forward to go through the gate with the gun at his back. But as he's going forward, he says, you'll count the minutes and the hours, knowing that the moment approaches when I, the judge, I, the jury, act as executioner, as hangman for your son. And he knocks him over the head, knocks him down on the ground, totally unconscious. So fast forward, when Lucas wakes up, of course, he's been tied to the wheel of his wagon. So he's sitting on the ground like this, and his hands are tied to the wheel like this. So he looks over and he sees the judge making a noose. And the judge looks over at him, and the judge says, now soon the scales of justice will be balanced. And Lucas said, well, why not now? You've got me. You've got me. And the judge said, oh, no, no, no. This is not for you. There was no hangman's noose for me, but for my son. Now Lucas is getting the picture. Lucas is like, well, but it's me. Listen, it's me. I'm here. I'm the one you're after. I'm the one who caught your boy. I'm the one you have to judge and punish. And the judge said, this is my punishment. As I had to wait for my son to hang, so shall you wait for yours to do likewise. Now Lucas is realizing he's stuck. Now he's angry. If you touch him, if you harm him in any way, I'll kill you. I'll kill you. If I have to crawl back from my grave to do it. So what's the judge do? He just walks over to him and takes the handkerchief and ties it around his mouth so he gags him so he don't have to hear nothing else. He got this. Well, he can't say anything else. And he just walks away and goes and sits down. He sits down outside. Now he's going to sit there, and they're both going to wait for Mark to come home from school. So shortly thereafter, you do hear a horse approaching, and the judge gets up and he goes over and he meets him and he says, hello, boy. And the voice says, is Mr. McCain around? Now the judge is like, oh, aren't you his son? And he's like, oh, no, no, no. And I'm sure glad I'm not him today, because he won't be home till way past dark. And the judge said, way past dark? And the boy said, well, that's what he told me to tell his pa, because the teacher caught him pitching spitballs. And so he got to cut a whole cord of wood. And that's a big heap of work. So will you tell Mr. McCain for me? And the judge just said, I'll tell him, boy. So the boy, he just said, thank you, sir. And he just went on home. Now, the judge, he goes over to Lucas, because I know Lucas heard what the boy said. And the judge said, well, you know what? Till dark, I'm going to go get him now. I'm going to go get your boy and bring him here. So he leaves to go to the school. And, so he's going to the school where Mark is chopping the wood. Now, back at the ranch, while he's going to school to get Mark, Lucas is using his feet to try to knock over a container that has hot coals in it because he wants to try to get the coals to the ropes so that he can get a loose. So, but at the same time, the judge has arrived at the school. Now he's telling Mark and the teacher, excuse me, that Lucas has been hurt. And the teacher was, she said, well, okay, Mark, you're excused. And she says to him, she says, well, is it serious? And he says, well, it's serious, but not fatal. He has a badly broken ankle. So Mark said, well, how did it happen? And the judge said, well, his wagon hit a rock, and his wagon flipped over, and he tried to jump free, but his foot got caught. So at that, Mark was just kind of hugging his horse. He went to get his horse, and the judge noticed how he was hugging the horse, and he said, what is it, boy? And Mark said, well, I was just giving thanks that it wasn't anything worse. And the judge said to you, are you a God-fearing boy? And he said, well, of course, sir. And the judge said, well, that's a good boy. Now come on and I'll show you where your pa is. So they ride off together. Now at the ranch, Lucas, he's managed to roll himself on the wheel to get the ropes to the coals. So he gets one hand free. But as he's doing that, out on the trail, Mark and the judge are coming, but the judge's horse trips over a log. And the horse himself falls down, but it throws the judge, and he lands over there on his back. And Mark goes back to where the judge is laying, and he's like, oh, how do you feel? How do you feel? Are you all right? And the judge was like, no, my head hurts. And he was kind of, talking, he was kind of groggy. And Mark says, well, I'll go get somebody. And he's like, no, don't deny your pa. And Mark looked at him with this questioning look, like, what is he talking about, my pa? And then the judge, he's kind of delirious, and he says, your pa's righteous. Those people, they was lying when they said you did evil to deny me. Weren't they, boy? Weren't they? And Mark, he just said, of course they were. Of course they were. And the judge, he's still delirious, and he's saying, Pa, call me Pa. I want to hear it. Tell me that you'll never deny me. Say it, boy. Say it. Say Pa. And Mark said, Pa. And the judge laid there, and he just said, thank you, boy, thank you. But he grabs his head again, and he passed out. So fast forward now, let's switch over. At the ranch, Lucius has gotten himself loose, and he's on his horse riding like all get out to get to the school. But meanwhile, Mark has propped the judge up under a tree, and he's like going to the stream right there and getting water and putting the cold water on his forehead and his face. And finally, the judge regains consciousness. Says Mark says, oh, good. You know who I am now? And he says, yeah, you're McCain's boy. Oh, you could have gone off and left me, but you stayed here caring for me. And Mark said, well, you were kind of out of your head for a while there. You kept calling me Ethan, and you kept asking me to call you Pa. And he said, well, did you? And Mark said, sure I did, because I was afraid not to. So All the man did, he just kind of laid there, and then he said, "Oh, thank you, boy." But then he grabbed his head again and he said, "Oh, would you please bring me some water?" So Mark goes back to the stream to get some water. But then you see the judge taking aim with his rifle in the direction of Mark. And you see Mark fall, but at the same time, now you hear Lucas rushing up, and he jumps off the horse and he goes straight for the judge, and he grabs him up under his collar and he's like, "You devil, you devil, you devil! I'll see you! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" And he's grabbing him up, and he's choking him by the throat and everything, and he's like, "I'll see you in fire and brimstone for the devil that you are!" And just then in the back you hear Mark saying, "Pa, Pa." And Lucas looks around and he lets the man go. "Mark," he says, and Mark is holding up a rattlesnake. He said, "It was a rattler, Pa. I didn't see it, and he shot it." And Lucas, he was hugging Mark and everything. And then Mark realized, he said, "Wait a minute. He said you had a broken ankle." And he looks over at the old man and he says, "You said he had a broken ankle." He says, "Yeah, I did. And Lucas said, "I don't know whether to kill you or thank you, but why did you save my boy?" Now, the judge said, "I saved him for the mercy of the Lord God Jehovah to deliver me from the torment that I feel for the evil that I brought others. For he is the true judge of all things, and I am but his." And he had a heart attack and he died. Moral of the story is what? Never let hate or revenge take over your life. He saved Mark so that God would have mercy on him and deliver him, relieve him of the torment he was feeling for all the evil things he had done to other people. Like it says in Romans 12:19, it says, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves." Avenge means what? It means to get satisfaction for a wrong done to you or someone else. It says, "But don't avenge yourselves, for it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord." And to revenge, or to have revenge, to have vengeance. What are you trying to avenge? Vengeance simply means punishment that you're inflicting for an offense. In other words, don't take it upon yourself to do God's job. What are you trying to avenge? Stop trying to do God's job. Think about it. Change your ways just like he did, because you're going to need forgiveness as well. And my closing words for today are, regardless of who has wronged you, let go and let God handle it. Until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.